Okay, so welcome everyone to somewhat advanced DBA tools development. We're not going to get too crazy, it's just a little bit. So my name is Chrissy LeMaire, and I am a senior systems engineer at NATO Special Ops headquarters in Belgium. I've worked with SQL Server since 1999, and I've been a PowerShell MVP since 2015. And just recently, actually, oops, wrong slide. So I'm also a module maker and maintainer. I have created DBA tools and also DBA checks. And I've also started a new PaaS DevOps chapter. So if you're interested in DevOps and you're part of the SQL Server community, you can go to devops.paas.org and check out our presentations. Also, I have been working with PowerShell since 2005. Lee Holmes is a really nice guy. He said, remember that time that you contributed code to PowerShell? It was actually a comment, but I was still super pumped about it. So this is me back at his office in Seattle in 2005.
Yes, I'm Fred. Some people call me Friedrich Weinmann. I don't know why. I blame my parents. I lead the PowerShell user group in Stuttgart. Been a Sapien MVP since 2017, and I also work a lot on the dbatools project as its infrastructure architect. In the spare time, the copies I have, I also maintain my own modules, specifically the PS framework is my baby.
Awesome. All right, so today's agenda, we're going to give an intro to give you some context about why we're here at a PowerShell conference talking about somewhat advanced DBA tools development, and then we're going to give you a demo. So DBA tools, how many of you currently use DBA tools on a regular basis? That's magical, awesome. And how many of you work with SQL Server on a regular basis? Oh, y'all are my people, what up? All right, so DBA tools began back in 2014 as just Start SQL Migration.ps1, but over time it's grown so much. And the reason that we're here today at a PowerShell conference is to talk about what it's like for us to grow and how we were able to handle a lot of the issues that we found, or plug the holes that we found with PowerShell. So how large has this grown? Let's look at the numbers.
We have by now more than 100 contributors.
Thank you all.
Absolutely. Special call out to Matthias, who made it exactly in the number 100.
Yes.
Also, Matthias Chesney should be around here somewhere. We have got more than 380 commands, not quite the 380 millions Rob claimed yet, but we're working on that.
We are.
Distributed over more than 1,000 files, lots of that infrastructure and supporting files. You made an incredible amount of pester tests. They also ship with the module, by the way, so people can test the module on-site. It's not just something, we worked on all labs, so it should be working on yours. Go run the tests. You've got a lot of people in the channel with, asking questions, interacting with people, users helping users. It's a crazy active community, and we have lots of fun with that. And by now, we have exceeded more than 70,000 downloads over the PowerShell gallery and our own website.
And something that I like about this is I was listening to a podcast about module maintenance, and the guy was like, you know, if you could go back in time and do things differently, what would you have done? And the maintainer said, I would have started some sort of chat room. So we are on the SQL community Slack, but you can also use Gitter. And then also they said that they would have started testing earlier, and that's something that I have experienced too. So if you start doing module development, I recommend both of those things as you're growing. So with DBA tools, I think that one of the most important things that led to the great adoption and seeing all of the hands here, which is just so exciting to me, is that we try not to scare people. And I think that for me, whenever I was working with PowerShell, it was kind of scary. They had all of this red stuff. It was kind of intimidating. And so with DBA tools, I wanted to make sure that people weren't as scared by it and that it was easy to adopt. We're also backwards compatible. And so, it started out as the migration commands. And what we want to do is we try to support PowerShell version 3. We try to support SQL Server 2000. And I think that has helped increase adoption as well. Because we weren't programming for PowerShell 2, it really wasn't that much of a sacrifice for us. Now, I say that we are backwards compatible. Unfortunately, if you're wondering, we don't support PowerShell Core yet, and the reason is because SMO from the SQL Server Management team, they aren't fully ported to to Core yet, but once they are, then our module will totally support it and be Core compatible.
So by all means, do contact the support team from the product team.
Yes.
And give them hell until they finally get it done.
And
It will help.
And shout out to Joey Aiello. I saw him send an email yesterday that was like, hey, take a look at the libraries that dbatools is using and please try to put some priority. And I was like, that's awesome. And I bought him a beer.
You notice the correlation there? You know what you have to do now? There will be a lot of beers.
So the other thing that we did was we have so many different ways that you can install the dbatools. The PowerShell gallery just made it so simple for so many modules. And actually with dbHX, we decided just to use that, and we've had a lot of success by just distributing the module via PowerShell gallery. And finally, another part of that user friendliness is providing help via GitHub and via the SQL community Slack.
Well, one of the things we do that had to figure out somehow were the import times. Once upon a time, Chrissy was trash talking a bit over the SQL Server module.
I did.
Because it was taking so eternally long to import. Well, as dbatools grew in size, guess what happened? 2 seconds,
I was
4
so embarrassed,
seconds,
y'all.
8 seconds, 20 seconds.
I was eating crow, being like, I'm sorry. I was teasing you guys.
So one of the things we do, we have during the module import, by now we have more than 6 run spaces running at the same time, adding resources. Specifically, all the libraries that have to be loaded in the background can run at the same time as function import and other resources. So we parallelize the import quite heavily, just to make it somehow happen faster.
Yeah, so whenever you're working with really large modules, those import times, especially, how many of you use compiled C# commandlets when you're doing PowerShell? Yeah, and so most everyone else is doing functions. Unfortunately, whenever you're importing, if you have like 380 commands, it's going to parse all of that text and it'll be slower. So that's one of the things that we do. We also, right now, if you create a command in dbatools, you're going to create a file in the functions directory. Whenever I actually publish it to the to the PowerShell gallery, I combine all of that into one PSM1 file and import it that way. And that has sped up. I think that took like 2 seconds off the top. But that also meant that if you are a developer for our module, that, it had to acknowledge, hey, I need to import the new functions and the modified functions in a different way. So just to let you guys know, what we did was we detected for a .git directory, and if it existed, then it imports the slower, older way. And if not, then it's a lot faster. And we got that down to about 1.6 seconds.
That works especially for testing. One thing to note, this 2 seconds off the top depends heavily on the environment. If you've got strong security policies, it was like from 40 seconds to 8.
Yes.
So it's more than just a trivial change on that. So if you publish a module, do compile them into a single file, even if you keep the originals around. All right, we also kind of dislike this the sea of blood issue, because if people see a red error message, they know this is not working, let's ask Google for solution 2. This is the usual reaction I received from my teammates when I published their code. So, yeah. We've got logging to probably help debugging. We have configuration management, because all the different options need some handling. And we did some fancy work with parameter types. We'll be getting into that a lot more later.
Yeah, so these are all of the kind of the holes that we were plugging that are missing from PowerShell. I hear that Python has a really awesome logging system, and hopefully ours kind of compares. I don't know.
We've got them beat that to rights.
Yes. All right, so it is demo time. What up?
All right. Now, where's my good VS Code? Yes, that is a joke. I hate it. Hate it. Hate it.
The joke?
No, the VS Code.
Okay. All right, so the first thing that we had, what? Oh, sorry.
The screen
Hold on.
thingy that's switching
It's
over
tapping
is
down.
a bit nasty.
All right. Oh, never mind. Thank you. I was so busy staring at the screen. All right. So for me as a SQL Server professional, seeing anything red scared the crap out of me. You know, if I was working with PowerShell and SQL Server, I was like, oh my God, does this red mean that all of my data's gone? And it's really, I found that PowerShell's response was just over the top. Like, let's take a look at what happens with get child item.
Oh, your data is gone. Well, your file is not there, but hey.
Did I delete everything? I don't know. Like, to me, this is kind of, it's just excessive. And I actually also have a Linux background, and it was just like chill. It was like, hey, either it didn't return anything, so it was null, or it would just be like didn't exist. And so this was an issue that we wanted to address.
Yes, so for internal commands, let's continue the bloodbath by adding some pro statement. Works wonderfully, and works wonderfully at scaring off SQL Server admins that are already hostile to PowerShell to begin with. It was not a good adoption experience. So instead, when I joined, Chrissy was moving steadily over to write warning. Nice yellow messages work well. These are not scary, these are just
Oh, feels good.
some error happened.
Whatevs. No big deal. No data loss.
Yes. And then there comes a guy around, tries to run a dbatools command, and tries to try catch it, and what happens?
Oops.
Everything works, everything fine as far as the developer knows. You know, exceptions should be tried and caught, and no, not much happening.
Hey, it just works.
So what we did, once they got that going, and the issue clarified, we moved over to opt-in exceptions. By default, we will not throw exceptions, we will throw nice yellow warnings, try to interpret the error, the issue that happened. But the user can opt into exceptions, so he might write an unattended script where bloody red is not that much of an issue. So let's make that happen.
So this allows us to go from a user focus to a more developer focus.
Without sacrificing user experience. So we still have some error happen message, works well enough. Now let's opt into receiving exceptions. Do that again, and everything is fine. At least that's what I thought when I proposed that solution. And then comes along Chrissy, yeah. Because she was like, you know, Fred, this is actually nice, but we don't have very many experienced developers contributing to dbatools. If we see their commands like that, we'll never get consistency because they will fail at using that. So, some head scratching and refinements later, we agreed on a style that actually agreed with most of the contributors. So we went with the command stop function. So if you want to stop the function, you run stop function. That was a kind of mental leap that most people actually managed to accept, yes, this will probably work, and contributors could just deal with that. So, some error happened, yeah, happens. Now, the developer enables exceptions, and he receives an exception. Every single dbatools command has the enable exception switch parameter. So if you're going to script against dbatools and you want to try catch it, just set it to enable exception and you're good to go.
That's how we made it nice.
And for the individual contributor, he doesn't really have to deal that much with it. So let's see a function that can kill it on the begin block. Now, if we want to kill it without an exception, we can't use throw, obviously. I caught some people using break and continue.
That was me.
Yeah, it was you. Don't think I'll ever forget you, that one. That's not something I'll be able to absolve you from.
He's taught me a lot, I won't lie.
Because break and continue can really shatter your commands if you use it inappropriately. But return will kill the current block, so we have to test in the process block again, which this command is for, and also kill it there if return. No objects return, just kill it silently. And then we will process something, and if we have some demo code, so let's ignore that part. Let's just run it. Works fine, no error, everything was legal. Let's kill the test in the begin block. Instantly works. Because stop function will tell test function interrupt, go return true, and it will return. Kill it with fire. This was supposed to go fiery. And something, did I mess up? No, I just didn't run it. Works immediately like that. And with try catch, we can now use that in a script. And basically every single dbatools command handles just like that, like the get test example, just hit enable exception switch. I think I managed to fix that one. All these demo kind of things. Yes. Sorry, Chrissy.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah.
I was like, where is he typing? I can't even see it.
Okay. No. This should probably die in, well, not for fire, but in yellow warning. And it will continue with the next item, so it's like silently continue or continue without exception. The actual exception is also locked, so we get to that later. So the exception code is still available for debugging, and we.
And to me, this is so much more pleasant to the end user that if you have a failed login, it's just not like blaring red everywhere. It's just a very straightforward login failed, and you know how to work with it instead of this.
And the original error is in the error variable, so you can look it up with your usual tools, and it will still be there. It just wasn't printed by default in bloody red. But we can go to bloody red if you want to. In this instance, it will not continue. It will be a terminating exception and kill it right there and then. All right, this is how we did the opt-in part.
Very nice timing, by the way, 6 minutes. All right, so the next thing that we are going to talk about is the configuration. So, you know, if you open up SQL Server Management Studio and you have your login dialog box and you can go to advanced options, you could set, you know, trust the certificate, you could set your connection timeout, etc. That's something that we wanted to offer as well that's not easily available in PowerShell. And another way to look at it is, you know, we wanted basically a tools options, and we did that with our configuration settings.
So, if you look at PS Readline, it's one of my favorite modules. Really, thank you, Jason. Awesome work. I don't think anybody of us would like an interactive console use today if he hadn't done that. But there are options about that, and he's got a command called get PS Readline option to read them, and set PS Readline option to set all these nice options that are available in PS Readline, which are quite a few. And he's got parameters for almost all of them.
Wow.
So, that PS Readline option must be a truly awesome ZMDLET in the complexity to actually process all these different parameters, all of which need to be documented, all of which need to be tested, handled, error managed. It's a pain. And the problem is it just doesn't scale to the level of dbatools. I think basically PS Readline has already exceeded the comfortable use scale. So we couldn't go that way. It would have been a real mess. So what we did instead is we had a name for the property and the value. Let's look at this in action, because action is a bit lots of setting, lots of options. Now, Chrissy always keeps bugging me about, you know, there's this out grid view that kind of makes it a little more, you know, easier to use. Well, if the window would show up in the front, I'd even agree. So we've got individual settings for a lot of commands in dbatools, settings, behaviors, SQL connections, with an onboard description which means every single setting is documented as part of the code, has a specific value that it is set to, and what is not yet quite visible, input validation for the user so we can't break it.
Something that I like about this is it'll offload some of our parameters like we had mentioned before. So somebody might say, hey, can you add a connection timeout to this specific command? And imagine like how many of our commands could use that connection timeout. So instead we just go to the configuration. And if anybody was in Rob and I's talk yesterday, you may recognize this. Basically, he had built this for dbatools, and it was so useful that he created another module called PS Framework. And with that module, we were able to use to create a whole brand new module within 2 months, and that was DBA checks. Because of all of this, it just simplified our entire approach to programming the new module.
All right.
Sorry, I took up some of your time.
No worries. So, let's see. Yes, and the last one I almost forgot to mention, we'll be getting into that soon a bit in more detail. You can react to changes, run a script block event when somebody changes a setting, which is important for performance reasons in quite a few instances. And she keeps bugging me about performance, I don't know why. It's working, so shouldn't that be enough? All right, now let's create a new configuration item for SQL connection encryption settings. Now, sorry, Chrissy, I know I promised you to give you the setting earlier, but you know, conference.
You're a busy man, it's fine.
So first we need a name for that. We give it a default value of true. By default, we encrypt connections. Initialize is something you need when you define a setting and the module, just ignore that, it's a bit too complex for the presentation here. We've got validation. Validation scripts are registered by name. So when you define a setting, you have visible validation that is easily readable instead of a complex script block, which most of our contributors would not be able to read. The handler is the event that is fired when the setting is changed. I just added a right host so we can see something happening. Sorry, puppies, I like them. And finally, a description, because frankly, a configuration setting without its own documentation, without a description of what it's doing, is bloody useless. Because if the user doesn't know what it's doing, well, yeah, he isn't going to use it. No, it won't happen. So, run it, and we now have a new setting that we can immediately access. So, let's change it to something that is probably not quite a legal value. Yes, victory.
Nice. And it's chill too. It's just like, hey, I couldn't update it. It's not like a big sea of blood.
All right. However, we can, of course, specify legal value, in which case the event was properly executed and now we know it is set to false. We don't have to take the word of the output, we can just check again and it will be valid. Now, this is nice from a user experience point of perspective, but in scripting, in the commands, it would be inconvenient to access the actual value. So what we have is a dedicated command to retrieve the setting. Just the value, and you can include that. It also has an additional parameter called fallback. So you can prepare for the case of the user managing to break the validation after all, or if something else went wrong. That works. So, but now, we shouldn't be disabling encryption unless there's a valid reason, and you should be talking to your boss about a new security project if you do. Let's go back to secure. All right. Now, the configuration system is available in all run spaces, meaning if you change the setting on your main run space, every single multi-threaded instance of dbatools will have that setting. So it's a one-time thing, and everything will understand it. It's not scope-bound as most PowerShell variables are. It's also easy to scale because we can just another set DBA config setting, and add another line. It's one line per setting and not like one parameter plus the description plus any implementation. Yeah.
Sorry, we have 7 minutes per segment and I'm on it.
Yeah, she keeps telling me about that. And
You have 1 extra minute.
And similar to how it works in DBA checks, all these settings can be deployed per group policy, per DSC, per
That's
System
so
Center
cool.
Configurations Manager. So you can actually roll out policies company-wide about how you want to connect it. You can enforce them, you can set default settings. So it is actually manageable because we do have some potentially questionable options in there, like reinstating WMI connections. Yes?
How does that scale to Linux later on when we're changing over to PC?
It works the same. It just does not have registry-based persistence. The persistence option is optional. It is not necessary for that part. You can update a profile or a configuration script. And basically, I expect to have the configuration the file-based configuration option available by then.
Cool.
So it's definitely on the fairly immediate roadmap to support persistence in configuration files, JSON-based. So the average Linux admin will still be comfortable with that, because I don't think they will be happy with me if I go to CLI XML. Wonder why. All right.
All right. Okay, so the logging. This part was really exciting for me because when I first started, it was super embarrassing. I was like, man, where am I going to write all of this stuff that they would need to see? You know, whenever you do like an error and then you select, and you pipe it to select star, and then you get all this stuff and I was like, I'm going to take that, I'm going to put it in dbatools, exceptions.txt, and the documents. And it was a bad thing. And because so many people needed so much more information, and this is just a big, messy text file. So I asked Fred, said, can you please come up with some fancy solution to this?
And I told her, go look at this folder, and it's already there.
And I was like, what? Check out this folder.
I had this habit back then to kind of bulk update ideas I had without really confirming it with the project lead beforehand, one of the joys of working open source. So she just hadn't found that folder by that point. So let's take a look.
Look at this. So for me, whenever I saw this, I thought of, something like Altiris has something like this. All these bigger corporations, and suddenly my module felt enterprise ready because I had logs, I had XML, I had a whole directory dedicated to this, and it just looks super professional.
So we've got command time, message, timestamp, and all the other calling commands. In the next version, there will also be file and line number where it was written from. So yes, we're having a lot of fun with that. Let's go back.
It gets better.
Now, one of the things when you have a support call with, when somebody tells you something is broken, what you usually get, it's broken, go fix it. Who of you has in the last 1 month received a bug report that actually was well researched and enabled you to fix the problem swiftly? Raise your hands, please.
Go, Rob. You got a good audience, man.
We've got 2 people. We are really beating the average here. So what we did was we created a command called new dbatools support package, which kind of gathers all the information we want, which is a bit extensive. We will be grabbing all the messages, the logs, the errors, the input history, loaded modules, a screenshot of the entire console buffer.
So
like
cool.
what you see when you scroll up in your console. Every single line will be packaged into one XML file and then dropped on his desktop. Please submit that.
Everything is zipped in, and then they can send it over to us. And this, again, reminds me of that enterprise logging that I've seen, with something that costs $100,000 or $2 million. So that was exciting for me. And it's actually, this is available also in the PS framework, so you can put this as well into your own packages or your own modules.
All right, let's grab this one and open it. And it's your basic CLI XML. You can import it with import CLI XML and then just read the individual properties like console, buffer, or input history.
So this is just a little bit better than the email that I got earlier this week. the command doesn't work. Works on my machine.
All right. Now, if the basic default, if the basic support issue is handled, what we really needed as a fix as a challenge was, yes.
Sorry, I may have missed it, but how do you make sure that every command that's been added to the dbatools actually writes to this log?
That's part of what we are getting to. But
Thank you.
tester tests.
Hold on, wait. So the question was, how can we make sure that everything, all of our commands and dbatools writes to this? And that is, it's part of our templates and part of our standards. If we approve the PR, they have to use write message, they have to use stop function, and it writes to all of that. So we no longer use write verbose, etc. We have just a new, smaller little system.
Don't steal my content here now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, shit. I do that sometimes.
Yeah, I noticed.
It was a good question, though, because it's in the
most
content.
certainly. And to add to the answer, we also have pester tests for this. You get a very bloody fail from your pull request validation if you use something like write verbose.
Oh, cool. I didn't even know that.
Nobody messes with my system. So, about the logging itself, the main issue we had to face here was performance because, we're talking about SQL Server admins. They kind of care about performance, they kind of care about, I/O, and if you write to a file system and the file system happens to be slow, well, it won't do your functions any favors. So what we did was we created a dedicated run space that performs the logging, and all dbatools commands from all run spaces log to that run space, and the run space will actually write the logs and make sure even on process failure, it will still flush the appending messages. So, size, we had to handle some of the size part. We had to handle the usability so our contributors could actually use it. And the conflicts part, which was dealt with the run spaces. Let's take a look at the basic write verbose, which is a bad thing according to our pester tests and to any interview with me. But it works. Now we have a write message command that has different levels depending on what you want to write, amongst other things the verbose level, and of course the somewhat verbose level.
So this is where it came from. I was like, oh my God, somewhat verbose, very verbose. I love the whole list of it.
A proper list. We have a few of them.
Somewhat, just a little bit.
Now, let's go have some fun with very verbose, which is actually, all these levels have a number behind them. Which is important from a configuration perspective because they also deal with they also have debugging tools for developers because you can configure, using the configuration system you already saw, what message gets shown by default without even having to specify -verbose. So let's make very verbose very visible. And now they should be doing something. I think we encountered that before, but that's...
Oh yeah, this actually happened whenever we were practicing, and then you trash canned the host, and then you did a couple things, and then it came back, and I can't guarantee that that's what it was.
Let's trash it again. I like trashing VS Code. I mean, it's doing so to me involuntarily that the first thing I do is update my profile to automatically recover the presentation. So we're totally safe. All prerequisites are loaded again.
Cross your fingers.
And now it actually works.
Awesome. Yes! We did it.
We did it.
Trash can works.
All right, now this is the default output for messages to host, and we just told it to increase the level to up to 4, which is written. This allows us to have scaling visibility, so you can hide the less important messages but show the more important ones. You can also increase the verbose information level to show even the individual SQL statements as they are executed, which are hidden from verbose by default. So you've got a range of configuration options. What will actually be seen to me?
Hold on, there is something that I like about this. Some of our developers were they were determining what the script name was, and then also like adding a timestamp, and that's something that is built right into write message. So right now it says script block, but in general, it'll show the actual command. Even if it's an internal function that it's calling, it'll show that one.
All right. Let's move on to the performance aspects, which is the
Excellent.
run space. One of the features we use in starting PowerShell 5 is we name our run spaces. So you can actually see we have a dedicated logging run space and 2 more run spaces that keep running in the background to make dbatools a smooth experience. And we have a management system behind that that allows us to guarantee that these run spaces will not be duplicated if you import dbatools in multiple run spaces. Otherwise, we'd be seeding lots and lots of logging run space, and that would be kind of nasty. We're using C# for that. For details, go see me afterwards. All right, I think we'll have to skip that one. The logging options are, there are a lot of them available. We automatically rotate old logs. So if the logs go older than 7 days, they'll start vanishing on you. If the logs go larger than 100 megabytes, they'll start vanishing on you. Oldest ones first. So it's automatically somewhere in the background, and if you're not using it, it won't really hurt your systems. It's just be there, and by the time you look, most of it will already be gone again. All right, and since it's all in the same run space, yeah, file access.
This is just a little bit better than when I was, exporting to a single dbatools exception file.
Would have loved seeing that one in multiple run space scenarios.
Oh, I know. It happened a lot too.
Now, one of the fun things about the whole thing is there's a command to retrieve the information from within dbatools. And you can see the messages that were written. Just like that. So, one of the main issues I have with write variables is when do you use the -variables parameter? When something broke and you try to troubleshoot. So in order to troubleshoot it, you have to break it again. That is kind of, not neat enough for me. So I just thought myself, okay, let's have something we can actively retrieve for debugging and lookup purposes. And it will all be there. So let's add a new message and load it again. Thank you, Grid View, for being always in the background. And the new message is immediately available.
Awesome.
This data is stored in memory, and there's also a maximum size for that. Before the oldest entries will be discarded, you can increase that if you have some complex debugging issues, specifically in the migration commands.
Oh, yeah.
Because they have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of line of code executed. All right, let's look into one of my favorites.
So this one is really cool because, so for me, I'm primarily a PowerShell function writer, and he is a C# guy. And we have the SQL Server instance parameter, the SQL instance parameter. And for me, I would take that, and I would get like the first part is the machine name, and then if you do / and there's something there, then that's the instance name. But if not, then it's MS SQL Server. And there's all of these different ways to process it. And I was like, oh, well, why don't we just write an internal function so that we could process it, and then somebody would have all of the information. And he said, why don't we make a parameter class? And I was like, man, that sounds really complex. I don't know. But he insisted, and he was like, just let me show you. And then I thought that it was the coolest thing. So if you haven't worked with parameter classes, this will blow your mind, because, well, it blew mine.
All right. Now, the original part, as Chrissy already mentioned, we have often used just object as input type. And officially, the guideline was if you specify a server or connection object, it should be reused, because we have a dedicated connect command for all the complex options you can have during a connect. And if it was string, try parsing it somehow. And the problem here is that this was really hard to enforce across all the commands. We were 150 commands at the time. And it was, a user was using the dbatools command, and whether he could use the same syntax on the next command was guesswork and good luck and where's my rabbit food. It was really, some people would just assume it would be a string, but have still the object, because we could test against the parameter type. And Well, it was complete randomness. We had so many problems. Even the migration was a trouble because people were so often violating the guidelines on what to accept as input. I tell you. And then she went ahead and did an uncoordinated rollback scare because I wasn't available for 8 hours.
That's how I get him to do work.
Yeah.
I do it really badly, and he's like, no. And then the next day, there's a pull request.
All right. So what we have is a C# class that acts as an input adapter. So if we just specify a foo string, let's increase the size because now the output is actually of some interest. If we just have foo, it will automatically parse out the input and provide all these properties. For example, one of the most liked ones is the is-localhost property.
Oh my God, that is so super useful.
Which checks, for example, what IP addresses your network adapters has and parses that out.
And what's really cool is like there are some commands that we use that we aren't necessarily passing in a SQL server, we're passing in a computer name. And so it'll tell you, and you have to handle UAC differently if it's localhost and things like that. And this made it so much easier. And this was going to be part of my really junky function, was that I was going to figure out all of the different ways to do it. And now we just have this, which determines if it's localhost in a number of ways. And what's really cool is that Fred made it so that it was, it's actually SQL Server specific friendly, because sometimes you can pass in like a name pipe string and it's all funky, but this handles it very well as well.
Oh yes, it was fun. But the main thing from a development perspective is it's so much easier to use for contributors because they don't have to take care of the validation somewhere in begin process, and it is for us a lot easier to enforce. Because if you have to validate this as part of the beginner process block, it's really, really hard to write a reliable pester test against this.
Yes.
Whether the validation was and parsing was properly done. We can now test for the parameter type, and if that's all right, that's all we need to know, and we can test the parameter class in a separate test, whether the actual conversion performs to specs. So we have all these specific kind of input types that the SQL community supports, like dot is localhost. Now, you go show them. Yes. I think we need a bit more space to show. Yes, no, that will work. We have, of course, instance names. We have, of course, connection strings.
What?
And the fun thing about connection strings is, they will be reused. They are probably parsed, and the internal connection command to SQL server actually uses that connection string. So you can custom tailor connections like a SQL DBA would be used to. Now, another fun part about this is we have more than 380 commands, and virtually all of them use this. Now, recently I got this request, can't we have local DB support from Chrissy? I think it was November.
The people want it, and I want to give the people what they want.
Yeah. So, and then she goes, tell me, make it happen. In case you want.
Ask politely. I'm Southern.
Yes, there were lots of emoji involved in the group test. So, this change took me like half an hour. Half an hour to update more than 380 commands to understand localDB. So now you can ping localDB.
So cool.
Or you can do operating system up, lookup, so stuff. You can do remote sessions using connection strings, PowerShell sessions.
Can you show them the next one? I'm really hoping that it is.
What did it
Let's see. Whew, what? That? Oh.
You can do DNS objects. We don't have a domain controller available, but yes, it will take domain computers.
I had no idea he had enabled this, and he's like, "Oh, Chrissy, you could just pipe it from get AD computer." And I was like, "What?"
That was during the last PSConf EU, and she was like going through pains of exacting the proper property, and I was, Chrissy, what are you doing there?
I don't know.
I might have wanted to write a tutorial for this one and shown it off earlier, but it was so self-explanatory to me. Yes, and of course you can reuse connections. Would be a bit pointless without. And it will do, validation as well. So this is not going to work. White space in a computer name is usually frowned upon, so we don't do that. And this also won't work because, select is a reserved statement. You can't name an instance select.
I actually didn't know that. Did anyone else? I know. It's really cool what you can learn from reading the docs.
I've been looking up.
He read them for me.
I've been looking up the SQL Server documentation on that. But then I decided I want to parse it properly. I need to have validation.
So we have one more thing to show you guys, and then we'll take questions.
I'll run it. Now, here's the thing. Chrissy is a speed freak.
I do.
Like, if it's not fast enough, it's not good enough. The problem is the fast enough thing kind of depends on the caffeine level. So it's usually better to have hard numbers to show it's good. So we did quite a few steps to tune the whole thing, and we're gathering the performance data on each module import. So we can actually see what took how long. And we have that available on a developer insider-friendly way.
And this is what I love too. So I was like, Fred, man, can you help us? I'm super embarrassed. We're taking 5 seconds to load up dbatools. Can you figure out like where the pain point is? And he was like, oh, just do this method with the, colon import time. And it was already there, which was super cool. And you can see immediately where our pain point is, which should be. So we had the loading, but he's loading as a developer, and so that was slow, so we knew that we could get rid of that. The other point is the import SMO libraries, because if you load the SQL Server module from Microsoft, they load a subset of DLLs, and so it'll load in half a second, but there's also not as much functionality as we provide in our entire tool set. And so that is something that will probably always persist, but he did bring that number down by
quite a bit. However, this is a component value because we also need to wait for the run spaces to finish, because that's one of the things we outsource into a separate run space, the loading of the SMO libraries. Because they're just too much, we can tell it to get started and work on loading the functions definitions, the configuration items, all these kind of things. So we just get it started and later wait until they're finished. And sometimes that's fast, sometimes that's not quite so fast. That kind of depends on the .NET hygiene of the system.
And the execution policy.
And the execution policy.
Yeah,
and
that has a big impact.
A few other validation parts on the .NET aspects. Since my notebook is fairly sanitary and optimized and fairly a bit overpowered, as you can see on the size, I kind of value having a high-performance desktops. Yes.
So
I don't have to wait as long as some other people will have on this part.
We sign our module, and this is awesome in one way because, we're enterprise. You can tell that we approved all of the code that's there. The downside is that it does add to the import time sometimes, and Dr. Tobias had actually written about how execution policies really impact the import time. So if you are having problems with other modules too, that is something that you may want to explore to reduce the times overall. All right, and that concludes our demo. Do you guys have any questions? Are your minds all blown? Do you see value in this for your own internal modules as well? Yeah, awesome, very cool.
One aspect, most of the features you've seen here have been requested by dbatools members for outside of dbatools, which has kind of spawned the PS framework. So if you want the message, the logging system, it's all available. The
configuration, all of that, you can get it in PS framework. And then, yeah, it'll be familiar with our tool set as well. So I hope that you guys, oh, yes?
The logging system, I've seen several formats of logging now. Depending on what you've done. Is there a specific reason why you didn't choose to log from that?
Actually, log4net was not...
Repeat the question.
Why did we not choose log4net? Because, quite frankly, it's not flexible enough for me and not dynamical enough for me. For example, our logging system is in the background plugin based. You can have multiple logging providers that will log simultaneously to multiple solutions and with multiple filters included. For example, you could choose to write a logging provider for Azure Cloud Services and only log errors to Azure, while logging the full part to the file system. So it's, kind of toolkit. I admit, when I originally invented it, I wasn't aware of Log4net because I am coming from the admin side, not from the C# developer side. But by now I found a justification of keeping that.
His answers usually features.
Any other questions?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you, bruh.